You know those moments when a certain concept seems to be highlighted in your life, where it's like you're either learning a lot about it or you start to see how certain things relate to each other, or maybe it's just that you're seeing it playing out in real life before your eyes? Well, recently for me, that's been the topic of first impressions. And it's kind of an interesting topic because it's something that is both valuable in real life and also in stories. Because then we often have to introduce a character in stories, and that can often affect how they are perceived and if the audience will actually stick with the story beyond that introduction. And that kind of brings up the first kind of trigger for this video, in that it was the book Save the Tat by Blake Snyder. Now, I'm still currently in the process of reading it, but it's kind of interesting that the Save the Tat kind of concept and the title is basically based on that introduction, that first impression. And it's basically giving the audience one good thing about the character early on so that they know that they can cheer for and emphasize with them. And that isn't just like, oh, the character is so cool and doing all these cool things. No, it's kind of giving that kind of human relatability or that goodness and that virtue in essence. Like they're doing something like saving a cat or something. It's like this little simple act that shows that there's a person there worth kind of following through the story with. And it's kind of an interesting thing because it's one of those things we don't really think about, where we might skip over that scene, but it's like when you go back to it, you tend to ask yourself, okay, what made me actually start rooting for this character in the first place? Oh, it was that moment. Now, it might just go unnoticed by most people, but it's like not being knowledgeable at that one moment can actually change how you introduce characters in a story. And kind of thinking about it, though, I go to my kind of second topic, and it kind of goes into the third, but I realized that some of my early impressions of this book were based on the fact that I was finding agreement in what I was reading. And that's kind of the thing, is that when we find someone we are in agreement with, or we find that affirms our ideas or our values, we kind of tend to emphasize with them more. We're more willing to give them room to kind of state their point. And that can be both a good and a bad thing, because then it's kind of one of those things where, oh, we have common ground, so we have this understanding, we're speaking the same language. Yet the issue comes in is when that's all we hear. So we kind of start developing this echo chamber, and that's very easy to do today when we're basically on social media. There's basically an algorithm that tells you what you interact with. So if you're always going for the stuff that affirms you, that's all you're going to see. And you can even say, oh, I don't want to see this kind of content, or I don't want to see stuff from this user because they disagree with me. So then I won't see anything about them. And I'll have this nice, safe bubble that's just the people who agree with me. And the issue with that is that it forms this echo chamber that may not be able to tell you that, oh yeah, you're about to get blindsided by something, because no one actually told you what was really going on. And that's kind of something to be aware of, and why we may not always, well, we should probably be aware of stuff when we're just going for it because we agree with it. But there is another reason as well, in that we often we kind of let this first impression thing do all the explaining for us. And really, that's often due to something called the horn or the halo effect. And it's basically where we may see someone express a good action or have a good trait. And so we relate all the other good traits, all the traits we admire, to them as well, because they have this one trait that we really admire. Or maybe they did one good thing, so we think, oh, they always do good things. So we see like, oh, this person is kind or whatever, and so on and so forth. So we don't really see that they might not actually have all those traits that we're ascribing to them. And the same goes with the horn effect, in that we see one negative trait, and so we're assigning all these other ones to them, whereas they might actually have only that one trait. And it could even be very incidental, like we see someone doing a good deed one time, and we're suddenly ascribing all these traits when really they were just doing it almost because someone was watching them, when really they would never do it in actuality. Or maybe the native thing was we saw someone have like an accident or just be klutzy in general. So now we're thinking they were total klutz and maybe lazy or kind of perpetually late, when really they just had one incident where they were a klutz. A momentary lapse of coordination. So the thing is, we can kind of often almost let our first impression of someone fill our whole idea of that person, when really that's generally not the case for most people. So while it is good to make that solid first impression, especially with stories and introducing a character because it can determine whether the audience is going to stick around, I think that in reality, we might really want to pay attention to our second impressions as well. Because while our first impressions may give us an idea of who this person is, sometimes those first impressions can be way off and way kind of, how should I put this, done up in a sense, or kind of coordinated, or however you want to put it. It could be that you saw someone being their best on their best day ever, whereas you saw the other person at their worst on their worst day ever. When really, the person on their best day could actually be vain, egotistical, selfish, and greedy, but you've ascribed all those good traits to them, whereas the person on their worst day ever could actually be a genuine, unauthentic person and just doing their best. So the thing is, I guess I don't want to just say that don't let your first impressions be the whole story, but it's good to pay attention to them at times. Anyway, let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this video, feel free to like and share so that others may enjoy it as well, and you can also subscribe to this channel if you want to see more videos like this. Anyway, I'm Jonah, and you've been watching Lionsman Media, where we celebrate stories and the lessons you learn from them. Talk to you later, and have a great rest of your day.